All right, hello again. So, as Shakespeare once said, once more under the breach, dear friends, once more. But what I want to do with this video is put Act 2 to bed. It's got really only 4 scenes in the act. The first discussion will be a little bit long, and then the next scene is relatively brief. All right. So scene 3, the mood of the play suddenly changes. The audience has been as tense as Macbeth and Lady Macbeth in the last scene, and we need to relax a little bit now. So in your glossary, write down, comic relief. Okay, and this is what we're getting for. We're going to get a humorous scene with the porter. The porter is the man whose job it is to open the castle doors. At the end of the last scene, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth heard knocking at the south entry, and this is the porter. It has woken the porter, and he is going to open the door. Now the porter's been drinking all night, right? He's been drinking till like 3 or 4 in the morning, and this thing has woken him up. And so he's quite portrayed as still being drunk and having a lot to say about opening this door. He imagines himself as the porter to the gate of hell and the kinds of people he would let in. Farmers who hoarded grain with the hope that there would be a famine and he could charge exorbitant amounts, and it didn't happen, and he killed himself. A tailor for stealing out of a French hose. So French hose were fashionable garments, and he would be making them for some person, and he would take money from them to buy the material and not buy as much material as he said he would. So he would make them a little bit tight. And finally, an equivocator, someone who tries to argue both sides of a case, someone who tries to make you think one thing while really lying. And those are the sorts of people that I suspect Shakespeare would have hated, and so he makes them entrance to to hell, along with all the other people who go the primrose way to the everlasting bonfire. So there's lots of people who are going to be let into hell if the gates are open. Anyway, it's a moment of levity. And then we meet some new characters, Macduff and Lennox. Right, so Macduff is a new character, and he's another one of the nobles, and he has been charged with coming to wake Duncan so he can head off home in the morning. Macduff and Lennox came almost from another world, or perhaps the porter is more accurate than he thinks when he pretends to be the porter of the gate of hell. The tension mounts again as we wait for the murder to be discovered. Lennox's description of the unruly night would have been full of significance to the Elizabethans. They firmly believed that any disorder in human affairs was reflected by disorder in the world of nature. Okay, so the idea here is that the king is part of the great chain of being. And the great chain of being, goes from God all the way down to the lowliest creatures, and right beneath God is the king. And so whoever murders the king has upset the natural world, and things have kind of gone crazy. Macbeth is cautious, but we cannot miss the understatement of his reply to Lennox. "'Twas a rough night." Now here's the other thing. Okay, let's go. The moment we have been waiting for arrives. Macduff's words emphasize the fact that this is more than an ordinary murder. Confusion now hath made his masterpiece. Most sacrilegious murder hath broke ope the Lord's anointed temple. Right? So the Lord's anointed temple is Duncan's body, right? Because he rules by divine right. And so something is horribly, horribly wrong. Later theorists would call what's going on in nature, the winds being blown down, chimneys being blown down, strange screams of death, and the wind and all of that other stuff. Would be the pathetic fallacy, the best example being the earth was feverous and did shake. So the pathetic fallacy is Victorian suggesting that to suggest that nature has feelings about what people do is kind of ludicrous, so that's why it's called a fallacy, but nevertheless there it is. And in the case of a good example of the pathetic fallacy is the earth actually being personified as having a fever. And that fever, of course, is the virus that is Macbeth and the death of the king. Right? So, anyway, what he's really describing is likely an earthquake. The scene is chaotic. Alarm bells ring, and the characters appear from all sides of the stage. Macduff is almost hysterical. The king's sons are afraid. Macbeth impulsively kills Duncan's servants, and by doing so arouses Macduff's suspicion. Right? Macduff doesn't believe for a second that the guards killed Duncan. The speech in which Macbeth attempts to justify himself may perhaps convince the other Thanes, but we know how false it is, and the elaborate images, for example, his silver skin laced with his golden blood, stress this falsehood. Right? And Macduff sort of picks up on that because his response is kind of slapdash, like, how could I possibly refrain from killing these men? Lady Macbeth knows the truth too, for she faints or pretends to faint, and some attention is drawn away from her husband. Right, so she, makes a sort of elaborate gesture of fainting, and then people pay attention to her and away from his sort of lame excuse. In any case, that's the end of that scene. And what follows, scene 4. Now, I don't know if your version has scene 4 and 5 separated, or if it's all one long scene. In this case, in this book it treats it as one scene, so we'll go with that. The short scene between Ross and the old man serves 3 purposes. First, it continues the comparison begun in Lennox's lines in scene 3 between the human world and the natural world, mentioning strange events and stressing the eye. Unnatural, even like the deed that's done. Right, and some of the things that happen are quite remarkable. Right, so Ross has actually been witness to horses eating each other, which is a pretty unnatural thing. But there's a storm and the wind and all of that other stuff as the world reacts to the unnatural killing of Duncan. The second function of the scene appears when Macduff enters to bring more news. It indicates the passing of time. So they've kind of wrapped up their business at Inverness, and they're all sort of heading off to various places. And that business means investigating the death of Duncan, as well as deciding, okay, well, now that the king's dead, what are we going to do? Right? Now, at the end of the last scene, Malcolm and Donalbain take off. Right? They say, the nearer in blood, the nearer bloody. Right? This murderous shaft that shot hath not yet lighted. So this arrow that's been shot has gone through Duncan and is looking for its final target. So they know that they are next in line. They don't believe that the guards did it either, and they also know that they are, probably in the sights of whoever it was that did this thing. So Malcolm heads off to England and Donalbain off to Ireland, which of course effectively removes that step on which Macbeth must fall down or leap. Right? That Prince of Cumberland has removed himself rather than Macbeth having to remove him. And so Macbeth being next in line is the obvious choice, regardless of whether or not Macduff believes his story. So the section function of the scene appears when Macduff enters to bring more news. It indicates the passing of time. Thirdly, it brings Macduff into greater prominence because it allows the actor playing the part of Macduff to reveal by the tone of his voice that Macduff continues to be suspicious of Macbeth, that he does not himself believe the answers he gives to Ross's questions. Right, so let's look at Ross's questions here and see what he's talking about. Right, so he says, is it known who did this more than bloody deed? Macduff responds, those that Macbeth hath slain. Right, he doesn't believe that, but that seems to be the answer. Alas, the day, what good could they pretend? They were suborned. They were bribed. Malcolm and Donalbain, the king's 2 sons, are stolen away and fled, which puts upon them the suspicion of the deed. Against nature still. Then 'tis most like the sovereignty will fall upon Macbeth. He has already named and gone to Scone to be invested. Right, and so they have decided that Macbeth will be king, and he's gone to Scone, where the stone of Scone resides, which they use in their investment ceremony, and so he'll become king. Now Ross asks Macduff, are you going there? And Macduff responds, no, cousin, I'll to Fife. Now Fife is his home. He's the Thane of Fife, and he's going home. He's going to, hole himself up in his castle to see how this all sort of falls out. Which also will put him at odds with Macbeth because he's expected as a noble to be at the coronation. Ross, however, is going to go to the coronation. And Macduff then expresses his concern about Macbeth's kingdom. He says, well, may you see things well done there. Adieu, lest our old robes sit easier than our new. And again, the robe images are positioned. So our old robes are positions under Duncan, sit easier, are more comfortable than our new robes, which is our positions under Macbeth, because he doesn't believe, he doesn't trust Macbeth, and he's not sure how that's going to play out. All right, so that's the end of Act 2, and maybe we'll get into Act 3 later on today. Nice talking to you.